Well, good morning. My name is Ernest Morrell, and I am a faculty member at the University of Notre Dame. I'm also the director of the Center for Literacy Education there. I'm very proud to be an advisory board member on the Library of Congress Literacy Awards.
And hello there. My name is Josh Cramer. I have the opportunity to serve as the Executive Vice President at the National Center for Families Learning, and I look forward to this conversation with Dr. Morrell.
Thanks, Josh. It's great to be able to talk with you. It's also great to be able to learn more about the National Center for Families Learning. I know you've been awarded twice recently from the Library of Congress. In 2017, NCFL was an American Prize winner, and in 2020, the David M. Rubenstein Special Response Award winner, specifically about your response to COVID and the recent social unrest. I think that's a good segue into some of the topics that we were planning to talk about today, particularly how to engage families in remote learning during COVID. So maybe it would be a good place to start if you could tell us a little bit about what the NCFL has been up to in this response.
Absolutely. Well, for those of you that don't know, NCFL is a 31-year-old nonprofit organization based out of Louisville, Kentucky. Just briefly, and I can go more into what we do as this conversation unfolds, we work through a two-generation model wherein we try to build both adult capacity for literacy and child capacity for literacy, and then bring adults and children together to learn. That work started at Appalachia, and we have continued that work in 34 states, more than 150 communities, and through digital communities like Wonderopolis, which actually engages around 15 million independent users each day, all around this big idea of trying to eradicate poverty through education solutions for families. And Dr. Morrell, to your point, obviously all of that work got turned upside down 7 months ago with the onset of the pandemic. As a country, we were immediately confronted with the knowledge that we knew that the disparities that existed and families that had barriers in front of them to learning, both literacy and other things, to get jobs and all of those things that make life good, we're now faced with the incredible challenge of a pandemic. And also in the family engagement realm, schools and community organizations in many cases were already a little bit resistant to engaging families for reasons that I can talk more about. And now we're actually in a situation, if we fast forward to today, where many school districts actually have policies prohibiting visitors in schools altogether or greatly discouraging community gatherings for all the right scientific reasons. But this put up several different barriers for family engagement. Family engagement was already viewed in education as kind of an add-on, in our opinion. And so, we've been on this 31-year campaign to make families the central unit of education in our country. And so we had to get creative, just like everybody else. And that creativity included things like, of course, virtual meetings like this. It included creative social distancing, food distributions with books. It included, in some cases, other opportunities to learn online. So, for example, I talked a little bit about Wonderopolis, which tries to inspire learning by creating wonders of the day and getting families to meet around those wonders and discuss them. That usership of our Wonderopolis platform went up by 40%. So we knew that people were engaging digitally, and so we built additional resources around that so that when parents are in the home, delivering education and as much as they can in these trying times, they would have free resources. And Wonderopolis is one of those resources that we have to offer. And so those are some of the main ways that we adapted during the pandemic. But to be honest, we're still adapting today. The new reality is setting in that families are really discouraged from going to schools. And so we're starting to, we started to see a little bit of dip in attendance for our virtual meetings. And so we've put our heads together around ideas like immersive virtual and augmented reality education and other ways that families can, potentially be more engaged during this time.
Yeah, so there's so many different ways that we can go from those comments. I think the first question I have is kind of pre the COVID response that I think is really important. I know in our work we talk about out of school time, which really dwarfs the amount of time that kids spend inside of school. We think about literacy learning. Kids spend about 1,000 hours a year inside of school and 4 to 5 times that amount outside of school with their families. So what would you say are some of the hallmarks of how NCFL conceptualizes family engagement and working with families?
Absolutely. So we really have three different ways that we work with schools and communities around family engagement. So number one, we have a portfolio of work that we call place-based programs. And obviously the definition of place has changed a little bit now, but the point is still the same. These are places where we're using our entire evidence-based family literacy approach. So this would be a program that's designed for low literacy adults, very low income adults who are really trying to get on that first rung of the ladder. And what we do is we provide a combination of adult education, something we call parent time, which is focused on actual parenting skills. We work with school systems and community groups around child education, and that can also include out of school time. And then we do something that has kind of been our hallmark in terms of our research, which is called PAC time, or parent and child together time, which is quite simply parents and children learning together in a way that's connected to a curriculum, whether it's out of school time or in school time. And so those are our place-based programs. We also do professional development just around high impact family engagement altogether. And we've seen a real uptick in our professional development interest right now, because obviously school systems and community groups all across the country are saying, okay, parents are now central to their child's education. We actually knew that they were before, but now we're forced to look at that reality. And so we provide robust professional development offerings in multiple contexts across the country. And then the third way that we really work with communities, both in school and out of school time, is through our community development work. And what's contained in community development, we didn't know 2 years ago when we created that department that we were going to be having hopefully a racial reawakening in our country. But community development is really an effort to work with whole communities around the idea of two-generation change, root cause analysis, and parent leadership. And what we've seen, especially during the pandemic, and I think our entire country's consciousness is at this point, it's no longer acceptable to talk about barriers that are in place without digging down to those root causes of things like systemic racism and poverty. And so in our parent leadership programs, we see parents doing that. And we've had some successes in facilitating. Parents take the lead. It's not a prescribed curriculum. We just simply try to provide a facilitative framework to basically follow parents into community problem solving.
Thank you. I think that's it's really powerful. And as you were talking, I was thinking about what a wonderful organization, and I can see why you've won 2 Library of Congress awards. But I was also thinking, since there are many people that are going to be listening to this conversation, thinking about what they could do from what you've learned at NCFL, what would you say are some kind of essential practices or ideas that we could share about how to better engage young children and families during this pandemic? And I like how you kind of wove in, we're in the middle of 2 pandemics, right? One has just happened upon us, and one has been with us for quite some time. And they're not unrelated to one another. But what would you advise?
That's a really good question. I think that the first and most important thing that I would say about successfully engaging families in literacy and in education is the realization that families are assets. And when we talk about low-income, ethnically diverse families, we know, and we've known for a long time, that there are huge funds of knowledge that exist within those communities. And we have to get away from, at NCFL, we talk a lot about the progression from doing things to families to doing things with families, but ultimately getting to the place where we're actually gaining things from families. And so letting parents really take that leadership role. I think that our country, more so now than ever before, needs to realize that we need to take an asset-based lens when we're working with families. Something else is that I think, and sometimes this is hard for educators. It was hard for me when I was an administrator in an education system before I came to NCFL, and that is that we have to share power. I think gone are the days that a school or community-based organization sits up on the hill and just transmits knowledge, and just expect families to learn that using an antiquated model that probably is based in some of the same biases that plague our country in many different ways. And so we really have to share power with parents and families and listen to their perspective, because they know what's best for their own child. And once we can do that, then we can look at, okay, let's build on some strengths here. I mean, obviously, if there are real needs that parents articulate, I need help getting a job or a better job, we can engage in that conversation. But what are those assets in a family that we can build upon to help the whole family be successful?
Yeah, I love that last comment, Josh, and it's very similar to my own work. And I've been asked several times over the past 7 months, as you have, what are we going to do during this pandemic? And I think that there are some really problematic assumptions. And one is kids spending more time with their families is a bad thing, that they haven't been learning from their families their entire lives. And that there's nothing that positive that can come from parents and children spending more time together. And I think you challenge all of those with this notion of funds of knowledge. I'm hoping that maybe one aspect of this work that can be positive is that schools can see how valuable assets families have been all along, and that what families can teach schools is how to see their children differently and work with them differently. This idea of families as assets and funds of knowledge, work that's been around for almost 30 years in the field, going back to the early 90s, is just now making its way into schools. And I think this notion of asset base, as you talked about, responds to what we often hear is a deficit orientation toward families and communities. In the professional development work that you do, can you talk specifically about some of the ways that you try to communicate or reorient schools to think about how to see families as assets?
So in terms of professional development and how we approach districts around this idea that families are assets, oftentimes we start with the research. And so the good news is that research is with us, right? Like, we've known for decades that family engagement improves educational outcomes in schools. And we've known also within that same body of research that for low income, ethnically diverse families, it's even more important that we build in family engagement. And then we go to really family storytelling, and we talk, because the idea that families are assets sounds really good, but I also understand that teachers and administrators oftentimes are not trained in any way to engage families. Really, there might be a small section of a teacher prep program that talks about that, but it's not a main course of study. And so we then go to family storytelling to make this come alive. And actually, we know what the research says about the impact of family literacy, but here are some actual human beings and what they've done through successful family engagement. We also celebrate each year the best family engagement teacher in the country. So we give out, through funding from Toyota, we give out a Family Teacher of the Year award every year. We're about to announce that winner for this year here in the next couple of weeks. And so we take the practices from the very best family engagement teachers in the country, and then we use those case studies and that information to really inspire teachers and educators to see families as assets and realize that the research actually tells us that teachers' jobs are easier when families are successfully engaged in schools, and that teacher retention rates are higher when families are successfully engaged in schools, in addition to the academic and behavioral outcomes. So we try to make that sell in two ways. Here's the research, this makes your job easier. And then on the other side of it, here are some real people, some real teachers who've been successful with families. And here are some families sharing their stories of what it felt like to be seen as an asset and how they were able to help their child reach their full potential.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about a colleague of mine. You may know her work, Gloria Ladson-Billings, who talks a lot about culturally responsive instruction. And we were on a call a few months ago, and someone started with the phrase, "when we go back." And Gloria just interrupted and said, "I hope we never go back. Where we need to go is forward." And she talked very articulately about, while no one wants a crisis, it's often only through crisis that we have radical transformations. So I'm wondering, even though none of us wants to see this either pandemic, continue any longer than they need to, what inspires you in terms of what we may have learned, or as we're at this unique pause where we might be able to reconsider education and literacy education at a very broad level, What would you like to see moving forward based upon what we've learned or what we've seen during this pandemic?
Yeah, Dr. Morrell, that's a really good, how do we find the silver lining? And I think at NCFL, we recognize that, as I said at the beginning, something that was kind of seen as an add-on, right? Like those families and, oh yeah, we have to engage the families and, we're just going to maybe tell them what we want them to do and we'll call that family engagement. Or we'll have a 15-minute parent-teacher conference and check the box. We've really moved away from that by force. And we now know that families and caregivers in homes or in communities are really the frontline delivery system for education. And while before we would have said that that was the case, we would have known it was an uphill battle. But I really think that now we should see family engagement and family literacy as really a center stone of the American educational system. Within that, we're going to have to get a lot better, as we just talked about, at realizing that families are assets, that we're not here to fix anybody, but we're here to listen and learn from the lived experience of the families who are with their children, and then match, our expertise around instruction and education with those family strengths and come up with a plan that's going to help that child reach their full potential. So for me, it's the singular idea that the family unit has jumped into the center of our education system officially now. And so we need to seize that moment from a policy standpoint. We need full funding for a program in the Department of Ed called Statewide Family Engagement Centers. Today, there are 13 of those statewide family engagement centers that are funded, and we need to see that all 50 states have those centers, I think, is a starting point. We also need to fund more family literacy programs. I mean, if parents are going to be educators of their children and caregivers are going to do that, how can we support those efforts? And I think, finally, I know I'm going on and on, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but the what's going to stick, and we're not going to go back to it being the same. I think that we're going to see, and we've already seen, a rapid expansion of high impact blended and immersive learning approaches. So no longer are we just saying, okay, we can do a Zoom meeting, but we're actually thinking about those pedagogies, which do exist, on how we actually use technology as an asset. And we're probably looking at a situation where we won't be in big groups as much anymore. And so how will we look at smaller groups of families working through immersive environments like virtual reality, augmented reality? And how are we, going to be thinking about maximizing a two-dimensional interaction like this so that we can use technology as an asset and as just an extension of the classroom and a way to engage families effectively?
Yeah, I think that's so important. When I think about the silver lining, which is kind of implied in the question, I think that we've never had the nation of teachers as interested or as knowledgeable about parents collectively as they are now, and I don't think we've had parents as empathetic and understanding of what happens inside of classrooms between teachers and their students as we do now. I think the real question is, well, how do we capitalize on that moment? When I think of engagement, I think of equity. So it's not didactic, it's not hierarchical, right? That there's engagement. And so now that you have teachers leaned into the communities and homes, and you have parents kind of leaned into the classroom in ways that they haven't had access, how do you facilitate the conversation, right? How do you create, maybe it's more of a question of the mechanisms than the outcomes per se. What are the mechanisms that we can leverage here so that parents and families can continue to, and teachers can work together in an ecology that kind of surrounds and bathes these young children in literacy that's influenced from both perspectives. It's a great vision, and I know that there are many who kind of share your enthusiasm that this moment also be a way to create bridges from homes and communities into schools. As we think about that, and there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, what do you perceive as some of the big challenges that lay ahead for us in kind of realizing this vision?
Well, I think that, for 400 years, the United States has suffered from racism, and we have those effects in place very much so and on display today. And I think that when you combine that reality with this notion that we know that family engagement and family literacy has a greater impact for students of color and communities, low-income communities, we're going to have to get okay with doing the most for those who have the least. And we're going to have to become okay with that. And I think as an independent nonprofit at NCFL, our mission statement is to eradicate poverty. So up front that we are focused on not necessarily all families. We care about all families, but we're focused on the families who need it the most. For a public school system, we're going to have to become okay with having that discussion, that we may have to engage some parents differently. We may have to look at schedules that match up with a family who's working more than one shift. We may have to address our own fear of working cross-culturally or inability to understand different cultures. And so there's going to have to be a lot of professional development around the idea of what equity actually is. Now it's a buzzword, but what it actually means is that the intensity of the solution needs to match the intensity of the problem. And that means that some families are going to need more supports and more resources than others. And so I think our country is going to struggle with that idea, because for a family who may or may not have some of the same barriers to their success, it can feel like my child's not getting as much support. Sure. But the fact of the matter is they may not need that support. So I think we're going to have a lot of discussions and conversations and professional development around the idea that equity means giving some families more resources than others, to try to bring everybody up to the same level. I hear a lot of school systems talking about equity, and I'm not sure that they're fully engaged in what that idea is. And I certainly think that's true, especially with family engagement. Right below the surface of why educators perhaps don't engage some families as well as others are all sorts of cultural conflicts, I think, and misunderstandings that exist just in terms of how we communicate, what times we meet, what type of food we serve, and what sorts of preconceived notions we might have about the families that we're working with.
Yeah, I think that these are not new challenges, but I do think that they've been illuminated, and maybe that's a real positive moving forward. The barriers to equity. I often think of if you're a kid and you submerge a ball underwater, right? And I think about the 400 years of oppression is that equity is when you remove the barriers. It's not as though you have to lift that ball up. It's naturally going to come to the surface. And how do we think about, how do we remove some of those barriers? I think that that's really implied in the conversation. It's not as though equity is not an unnatural condition. It's the oppression that's unnatural. And so we'll have to walk with, I think, that in mind. And as you say, challenge a lot of our assumptions and beliefs, and just say equity is what should naturally occur if we get out of the way with inequity. So we're at time, and I know that you've got a ton of resources on your website available to folks. How can people learn more about NCFL and what you do?
Absolutely. Well, the easiest way, you can check out our social media handles, but our website is kind of the nerve center. So you can go to www.familieslearning.org, and we actually have several free resources on our website, including a section just about COVID-19 response and some specific resources that people have found valuable during this time. So that's probably the best place to go.
I know I enjoyed learning about NCFL from reading the resources, but even more, I enjoyed the conversation with you today. So thank you for what you do. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for your leadership, Dr. Morrell. And NCFL is grateful for these awards. This helps us continue our mission and really try to make a difference for the families who need it the most.